back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilkWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another great episode. Here at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, we're all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. You know, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. It starts with each of us as an individual. So what have you done today to make your life a better life? What have you done today to make the world a better place? Making your life a better life starts with individual accountability. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, one of the great things about a bad attitude is we as individuals have the power to change it. One great way to do that, share the D-Rate the Hate podcast. Share it with your network of friends. Get them to share it. Subscribe. Leave us ratings and feedback. Always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's go. Friends, I ask the question in every episode. What have you done today to make your life a better life? What have you done today to make the world a better place? Making our lives better lives, in turn, makes the world a better place. It's something I learned a long time ago, and it's something I try to instill and make the point of saying in every single episode. So a question. Are you winning at life? Because if you're winning at life, you're making the world a better place. My guest this week, Dylan Rogers, has written a book, in many ways a roadmap for and about winning at life. From a very young age, Dylan had always been curious about the universe, so he pursued an understanding of it all. From this curiosity, he pursued and earned a bachelor's in aerospace engineering from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and a master's in applied systems engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology. All throughout his schooling and engineering experiences, he was dedicated to develop the engineering mindset and use it to help others create masterful lives. Today, he teaches the concepts behind achieving happiness, securing fulfillment, understanding why people hate, and finding success in their goals. Dylan's book, Winning at Life, A Guide to a Life Worth Living, is a guide through the three most profound concepts in life: meaning, happiness, and hate. It is a transformative journey through discovering your meaning in life, creating lasting happiness, and removing the hates that hold you back. You're not going to want to miss this great conversation where Dylan and I discuss his transformative journey, how he has used his background in engineering to get right to the source of happiness, hate, and a meaningful life. You're not going to want to miss it. So here we go. All right, Dylan Rogers, thank you for joining the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
All right, Dylan, your book, Winning at Life, caught my eye, and it seems like we talk the same language on a lot of different things, and I really appreciated some of the stuff you had to say. So I definitely appreciate you joining me here on the podcast. I know the listeners will also appreciate your message. So, Dylan, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your background. Talk about what led you to your Winning at Life mission.
Absolutely. I really appreciate, really happy to be here. So a little bit about my background. So right now I'm an author of Winning at Life. We just spoke about. I'm a speaker. I like to go out and speak at various events, and I'm a life coach. I'm a certified life coach, and I like to coach people on how to overcome their fears, limiting beliefs, and really how to thrive in life versus just surviving through it. So a little bit about how I got here. So I have a background in engineering. So I actually have a bachelor's in aerospace engineering and a master's in applied systems engineering. And going through that process of getting those degrees, I knew that I didn't want to be an engineer forever, but I wanted to have that ability to solve complex problems. And who better than engineers than to solve the most complex problems that life has to offer? And so for the Winning at Life, about 6 years ago, I was going through my schooling and I was looking around at the conditions of the world at the time. And I saw a lot of hate in the world. I was looking around and there were just people yelling at each other. There was people just looking at somebody else and purely based off of what they see or what they know about the other person's political identification or whatever it might be, have these powerful negative feelings towards them. So I'm like, why is this? This doesn't make any sense. Why do people hate? So I started doing research. I'm like, all right, why do people hate? What does the world have to say about it? And to my disappointment, when I was doing my research, I found that there's not a lot of information on why people hate. There's a lot of information on what people hate and the result, but not the symptoms, but not the cause. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, why is this? And most people just brush it off as human nature, that hate, no, it's part of being a person. And I didn't like that answer. So I decided, hey, hate is so important in the world today that it needs an answer. We need to understand it further. So I decided then and there, I will figure out why people hate. And I'm going to write a book so I can teach people. I can tell people why this powerful influence in the world even exists.
Yep.
So I started writing the book, and it started off as a why people hate. And doing over time, like all big projects, it sort of evolved. I realized that hate isn't some island in the middle of the ocean by itself. It's connected to the mainland. It's connected to everything else we do.
It is.
And so that's where Winning at Life started to form. So over time, along with figuring out why people hate, I learned answers to other profound questions like, what is the meaning of life? What is the key to happiness? And what I realized that in this life, there are two winning conditions. First is to secure a meaningful life, a purpose in our lives, a reason why we are alive. And second is to secure a happy life, because through positivity and growth and optimism, we are constructive both within ourselves and our own life and with the people around us. So a meaningful and a happy life are the two winning conditions of life. And the biggest barrier, the most profound obstacle between us and securing victory in this life is hate, because hate literally acts, again, as that barrier between us and finding meaning and happiness in life. So over time, that's how the book started as Why People Hate and evolved into Winning at Life, because by securing meaning and happiness in this life and by removing the hates in the way, we win at life and we live a life worth living. So that's the story behind the book and where it's kind of its origin story, if you will.
Nice. So Dylan, I really like the fact that you're coming at it from like that engineering kind of mindset, because I think all too often people look at something and they're going after the symptoms of everything. And hate is just a symptom of a bigger problem, much like you said, but it's connected to everything. And instead of just focusing on the hate, you've dove in like the engineer that you are and looking for the nucleus of the problem, getting right down to the actual origins of it. And then working outward from there, because like I said, way too often, I don't even care what the subject is, especially when it comes to like politics, but people just focus on the symptoms and they want to attack the symptoms rather than or address the symptoms rather than address the origin. And I think it's so important to actually get down to that nucleus, get down to the beginning of it. Where did it start? How did it become what it is now? And actually focus on that versus focus on the symptoms. So that's very important. I like it a lot.
Absolutely.
So what did you find out about hate? What do you think is the primary or the nucleus of that in most people, Dylan? Where does that hate start in most people?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. So hate, actually, it's broken down into two different sections or two different groups. So hate is, first off, it needs an origin. It needs a place it starts. So there's somewhere where our hate started, where those negative emotions arose that set us off in this path of hate. But just because something starts doesn't mean it continues. So then once it starts, there has to be something within us that it latches onto to remain a continuous influence. So what I call where it starts, its origin, the origin of hate, and where it latches onto to remain an influence, it's fulcrum. So a fulcrum is the part on a wall where a lever rests on. So it's set in there. It's a part of the wall. It's a part of something within us. It's latched onto us somehow to remain a continuous influence. And there are 3 origins of hate and 3 fulcrums of hate. So origins of hate, where it starts. The first origin of hate is hate taught by others, whether it's by a parent, a friend, some sort of role model in our lives taught us to hate, whether it is from our culture or environment or something like that. Somewhere in our environment, somebody said, hey, this is how the world works. This is how, what we should think. And we were taught hate by somebody else. Number 2 is hate derived by a negative experience. So our negative experiences, our traumas that happen throughout our lives, we can associate those powerful negative feelings with hate with some sort of trait from the cause. So for example, if we walk around at night and we get mugged, that's a horrific, negative experience. So we can associate those negative feelings, those negative emotions spawned from that event with some trait of it. So we could be afraid of walking around at night. We could be afraid of alleys. If we got mugged in an alley, we can be afraid of people, maybe some sort of maybe the person who did it had tattoos. Maybe if they were of a specific race or religion, we can associate those negative feelings with the person who was the cause of that traumatic experience. So that's how they can associate too. So hate taught by others, hate derived from a negative experience. And then finally, hate caused by conflicting beliefs. So our beliefs are the most powerful, influential roles in our lives. If we believe that we're a good person, we will act in ways in which are parallel to being a good person. If we believe that we're not good enough for an opportunity, we're not going to pursue it. Our beliefs literally manifest through our actions. And if we believe we can't do something, we won't do it. If we believe we can do something, we can. For beliefs, just picture the two opposing political parties, right? Those are all beliefs. But when you see the polar sides, there's such negative emotions associated to the other side. So these conflicting beliefs are like, when we associate beliefs to not just logic, but emotion, especially again, the polar ends of political parties, we add another layer of complexity to it. So when you look at both ends of a political party, they're not listening to each other because they feel like the opposing party's attacking their beliefs.
Yeah. Anytime somebody feels like their own belief system is being attacked, they're going to go on the defensive, and they aren't going to hear anymore what the other side is doing. They're going to be more or less in defense mode, and conversation at that point becomes lost.
100%. So when we have such powerful beliefs, we act and we're like, hey, this is how the world works. Any other way of thinking is wrong because this is how it works. We submit to a closed mindset. And in a closed mindset, everything outside of what we already believe becomes bad, and we try to avoid it. And it's an unfortunate side effect, but it's an aspect of self-preservation. Because if we're always changing our underlying beliefs, then we have no stability in our lives. So in order to find stability, it's actually tied to our ability to survive, is finding consistencies in our environment, both our beliefs and habits. Because when we live a certain way for so long, it tells our brain, hey, by living this way, we will survive. And over time, the longer we live in that certain way, whether it's a belief or a habit or whatever it might be, the more it's reinforcing to our brain, hey, live this way, believe these things, and you will survive. And the most powerful mechanism in the human body, in the human experience, is the drive to survive. Mm-hmm. And I see all motivation in two categories. One is to survive, which is where fear is derived from, which is where most of our actions derive from, is to survive, whether it's eating, whether it's going to sleep. Because if you don't sleep for about a week, then we start to our body breaks down to a point where we kind of go insane. But so survival is the prime motivational force for most people. And then on top of that, number two, then you have thriving. So you can't thrive until you survive. But so survival is the most powerful motivational force in people. And hate is actually tied to our need to survive, because it's tied to our need to find consistencies in our environment. Because through consistency and survival, our brain's like, hey, do this, you will survive long term. All right. So those are the three origins of hate. You're taught by a role model, whether it's a parent or friend. It's derived from a negative experience. Or three, it's spawned from a conflicting belief. And that's how hate starts. That's why it erupts within us. But just because, again, it starts doesn't mean it continues, doesn't mean it remains a lasting influence. So then there are three fulcrums of hate. The first fulcrum of hate is misunderstanding. When you don't understand somebody, either through ignorance or through lack or through incorrect information, it creates a barrier between us and understanding it. It's the exact opposite of understanding.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, It's a lot of that hate does continue and gain strength through ignorance. I mean, people, whether they remain ignorant on purpose or they just don't have the opportunity, or they use that fear to not engage in somebody with opposing beliefs, somebody with, somebody of a different race or ethnicity, things like that. So no, go ahead. I was acknowledging what you were saying.
100%. I really appreciate you bringing that up. So ignorance is inevitable. So most people have this negative association to the idea of ignorance. They think that when you say they're ignorant, you're meaning that they can't understand, that they're somehow incapable of understanding, but that's not what ignorance means. Ignorance is just not knowing. Ignorance is the absence of knowledge. And no, ignorance is inevitable. There's going to be a million different topics, if not more, in the world that we're just completely unaware of. So we're ignorant of them. Ignorance is inevitable, but hate is not. Hate is a decision. When we hate, we are deciding, hey, no, I understand that when I see this, whether it's another person, it's another whatever it might be, we can hate anything we have an emotional attachment to. But it's an understanding, hey, this thing always causes me these negative emotions. And hate is a conscious decision. And the reason we decide it is because we think it's acceptable. We think, it's okay to hate things. It's okay to have these negative associations. But what we don't realize is that what we hate, it literally is drawing our focus towards negative, towards things that destroy us, whether it's destroying opportunities, if it's people, we don't build those relationships, whether it's destroying our ability to, let's say we hate the idea of exercise, for example. I know I need to exercise to get into shape. I know I need to exercise to be healthy, but I hate exercising. Well, by hating it, by having that negative association, you're building this barrier between you and actually doing it. And it acts as a powerful obstacle in our way of doing it. The first reason that hate sticks around, the first fulcrum, is misunderstanding, whether, again, through ignorance or through misinformation. Number two is repudiation. It's a big word, but I like the concept. So basically, repudiation isn't just not knowing something, but refusing to listen to the other side, refusing to try to gain understanding. Mm-hmm. And there is a difference because, again, ignorance is inevitable. There is almost every concept in life. We only know a few things about the whole collective. If we make a graph of it, and out of 100%, we can put one little pin dot and maybe like 0.1% of possible knowledge we know. So that means everything else we're ignorant of in some way. Mm-hmm. And from that, there's two responses. One, I don't know, and I refuse to know because it doesn't matter, or I don't care. And that's where repudiation comes in. I'm ignorant. Mm-hmm. I understand. Maybe I don't have all the information on the topic, but I refuse to do this. And this is the way the world works. No, it doesn't matter. I don't need to know. Mm-hmm. But on the other end, where curiosity plays a role is, hey, I don't know. Now I'm going to put some work into knowing. I want to understand why this is happening. I want to understand other people. And unfortunately, a aspect of survival is judging other people. Mm-hmm. So when we judge other people, subconsciously, as it's a deep attachment to our survival mechanism, we're deciding, hey, are they good or are they bad? Are they safe or are they potentially dangerous? So if we decide, if there's some aspect of them, let's say it's an unfortunate thing in the world, but let's say they're of another race. And for whatever reason, you've made this belief or association to that race that they're potentially dangerous. Well, when you judge them based off of that trait, their race, for this example, then you're attaching that belief to it. You're saying, hey, they're potentially dangerous. Mm-hmm. So then our actions follow through and are parallel to that belief. So if you're walking down the street, maybe you cross the street to the other side. If you're in an elevator, maybe you hold your purse or something like that. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying you should do that, but that's how our brain works on a subconscious level. Is it's looking constantly for things that could be potentially dangerous and preparing us to act in ways for self-preservation.
Right. And to your point there, Dylan, people, when I think of repudiation and you kind of said it there, but the way that I like to think of it is just ignorance at its core level is not knowing what you don't know, period. You just don't know what you don't know. And everybody's ignorant of something. A lot of people are more ignorant of things than others, but a lot of times ignorance at its core, you just don't know what you don't know. Repudiation there, on the other hand, is knowing that I don't know something and refusing to learn it, refusing to try and get the information because I'm comfortable in not knowing what I don't know, or things that I don't want to know. I'm more comfortable in just staying in my bubble and holding on to my own thought patterns and keeping away from stuff that makes me uncomfortable. Repudiation. That's kind of the way I think of it.
No, absolutely. 100%. You 100%. That's exactly what I mean, because again, there's a difference between, just not knowing something, ignorance, and saying, hey, I know I'm ignorant of this thing. I know I don't have all the information, but I refuse to learn more about it. Correct. This is how the world works. This is what I already know. I'm going to keep believing. I'm going to keep thinking this information I already have upon it. And if you tell me something different, then I'm going to refuse to listen to you. And it's unfortunate, but as we can see, especially in politics and stuff like that, it happens all the time.
It happens all the time, Okay, so fulcrum 3. What's our third fulcrum?
Number 3, absolutely. So number 3, which is the most significant reason that hate sticks around in our lives, is fear. So we can fear situations, we can fear people, we can fear snakes and objects. Whatever we fear, we have this powerful negative association to. So let's say we fear a snake, for example. Every time we even see a snake, we can have this fight, flight, or freeze response. And basically we lose our ability to consciously and rationally think through the situation. And we're just trying to survive. We're running, we're trying to fight and destroy this thing that can potentially do harm to us, or we just freeze not knowing what to do. Mm-hmm. So whatever we have this association of fear with, it acts as just like hate, it acts as a barrier between us and understanding it. And with all these things, whether it's misunderstanding, whether it's repudiation, whether it is fear, if we then take steps to understand it, if we then overcome our fears, overcome those negative, motivating forces to survive, and instead try to understand those things, then we begin to remove the hates in the way. For example, for fear, when let's take the same example with a snake. If you are afraid of snakes, of course, whenever you look at them, you probably have these negative feelings that erupt. But if you then just hold a snake, go up and take a step toward the fear instead of away from it, you gain new clarity. And through clarity, you start to see things that you couldn't see before with this barrier, with this obstacle in the way. And through understanding that, hey, snakes are actually more afraid of you than you are of them. Snakes actually aren't there to hurt you. They're just trying to protect themselves. Like if you go next to a rattlesnake, they're just trying to protect themselves because you're within their vicinity. But by understanding it more, by gaining clarity as to the concept itself, the thing, whatever it might be, you start to understand it. And through understanding, our hates start to disappear. Because when we go to their foundation, when we understand something, when we understand how to fix a car, we're not afraid that if it breaks down, we won't know what to do. No, we'll know what to do. If we understand the motivations behind somebody's actions. So let's say, somebody hurt us in some way, and we feel so upset about them. But then later on, if we learn, maybe they were going through a rough day, maybe they had certain reasons for it. The more understanding we get, the less assuming that they did it or that cause was purely for harm. And through understanding, we find connections. We open up an avenue of communication, an avenue of growth. Right. With hate or fear in the way, we can't find that understanding. And that's the biggest obstacle between us and really coming closer as people and as a humanity, is that we don't understand each other. And these negative feelings, these negative associations through hate, no matter what origin, what fulcrum, it prevents us from that understanding in some way.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly right. And I had a conversation with Daryl Davis a while back here on the podcast, and that falls very much in line with what he said and what he's found in his interactions. I mean, he's one of the most incredible figures when it comes to depolarization between let's say white supremacists and people of color, and he does phenomenal work, but he talks a lot about ignorance and how ignorance leads to fear, and then fear manifests itself into hate, and then that hate into anger, and then that anger into violence. And it's a step-by-step process that just it turns into this continuous cycle and destroys people from within. And it's something that we definitely have to be conscious of, because just like your analogy with the snake, he makes a very similar analogy when he's talking to classrooms, talking in classrooms with children and stuff. He'll make the joke that, and say, "Hey, look at that snake under that chair," and everybody freaks out, because they're all afraid of the snake. But and then their first thing is, let's kill it, because their ignorance of what the snake is, leads to that fear, and then that fear leads to anger, and then it's definitely a cycle that we have to be aware of, Dylan. And I think you break it down into even smaller parts so people can identify within themselves. And I really like that people can identify in themselves where that ignorance comes from. Is that ignorance just not knowing what you don't know, or does it fall into the class of repudiation? I know what I don't know, but I want to remain ignorant of it, so I'm not going to go any further. All right, let's take it to your book, Dylan, Winning at Life. All right. What is now? I understand the book is not out yet. It comes out in July.
Yeah, July 11th.
July 11th. Awesome. But it can be pre-purchased on Amazon or on your website, and I think you can actually even get a gift. Is that correct? If you order it.
Oh yeah. So if you pre-order, I put together this workbook that pretty much prepares you for all the lessons throughout the book, through all the conversations. So it prepares you with a background of all of of some really good practices on finding your meaning of life and how to discover your purpose in life. I gave a couple examples in the workbook, and then on how to find happiness. There's a plethora of different examples and different studies on how to find happiness. So it goes through some of them and gives you some exercises on how to actually identify happiness in your life and how to start becoming happier, and actually gives you strategies to do that. And then finally, hate. It talks about your negative associations to whatever it might be. If you're afraid of going for that promotion, if you're afraid of pursuing some opportunity, there's underlying reasons for that. And through that fear, if you start to identify the origins, if you start to identify, I'm afraid that if I get that job, then that means I'll have more responsibilities, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to fulfill those. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do a good job. And it kind of dives into why that is, and gives you some questions on how to get over them, as far as a preparation for everything else that'll be talked about in the book will be expanded upon in the book, rather. Right. So absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
So the book itself is then just tell me a little bit more about the book. What is the person going to find? If the person buys Winning at Life, they open it up, what are they going to find in there, Dylan?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. So Winning at Life, as I mentioned before, is about the three most important concepts in life. The meaning in our lives, our purpose, happiness and how to actually create happiness, and hate, the greatest barrier between us and securing victory in this life. So when we win at life, we secure a happy and fulfilling life. So part one is broken up into three parts, each of these three main concepts: meaning, happiness, hate. So part one talks about the meaning in our life, and actually start from what is life, what is meaning, to try to get a kind of a philosophical background behind the meaning of life, in which I described the meaning of life in the book and supported it thoroughly before I actually applied it to our lives. So I'm like, hey, this is the background, this is the meaning of life, and this is how it applies to our lives. Because most people, when they try to find their meaning, their purpose, when they try to figure out the reason behind human existence, they just narrow their scope just to people. But people are a part of the whole system of life. When you look at all life, it's actually incredible. All life, individual life forms, they're not built purely for their own survival. They're built to contribute to other life in some way. So when you look at purely the circle of life, they're and an ecosystem. So an entire ecosystem is a bunch of individual life forms, but as an ecosystem itself, it's set up to survive forever in an endless cycle. So the herbivores eat the grass. Okay, so I'll start at the top. Carnivores eat the herbivores. Herbivores eat the grass, and And, there's that cycle of life, and then carnivores die and fertilize the grass. But when you look at it from another perspective, the carnivores are maintaining the population of the herbivores. So then when the herbivores eat the grass, they don't eat too much grass, and the grass levels can remain the same. And that's important for the ecosystem, the environment. One of the greatest examples of how this works is what's called a trophic cascade. And in Yellowstone, in the early, specifically in Yellowstone, with wolves in Yellowstone. So in the early 1900s, in order to make national parks safer, the wolves in Yellowstone began to get killed off. And what that did was, sure, it made it safer, but it started to make drastic changes in the ecosystem.
It did.
And those effects weren't actually realized until about the 1990s, when they started to reintroduce wolves into Yellowstone. So when they reintroduced wolves, the wolves started eating the herbivores, eating the deer. But what they also did was change the deer's behavior. The deers started moving out of places where they can be easily trapped, like gorges. And in these locations, the grass started growing back. And from that, the banks of rivers started to be more supported, and actually changed the flow of rivers with these new supported banks. So purely from reintroducing wolves into the ecosystem, the physical layout changed, the flow of rivers changed.
Yeah, I read an article about that recently. It was very fascinating, but it is fascinating how each individual life form does play its own role, and it may be completely unrelated. I mean, you would never guess that the existence of wolves in a certain area would trickle down through that ecosystem to a point where it actually has an effect on the banks of the river, or the foliage, whatever that word is, foliage in certain areas. No, it's a fascinating way to look at things, and people become, so absorbed, like you said, that almost pinpoint themselves and what their role is. But they gotta think about the whole, humans as an individual life form, and how we play our part in the ecosystem, and then other, life forms play their part in the ecosystem. So yeah, that's a great thing, and that can be found in the book.
Absolutely. So 100%. So it's basically like taking that consideration that we're a part of this whole versus just us. How can we then find our meaning in life? So basically, how do we contribute to all the life forms around us that support survival on a global scale? And so it goes through that. So then once we find meaning in our life, and at the end of the part, there's an exercise on how to find meaning in your life. So it's not just all this information, but I feel that information is nice. Information is cool. And it's just knowing it. But until we apply it, it doesn't really realize its true value. So I can know how to change my life, but until I use that information to change my life, then its true value isn't realized.
Nice.
So
yeah,
this whole, absolutely. Yeah. So this whole book is structured in a way to where you don't just get the information you need to change your life, but it's a guide through how to apply it to your life. So you actually realize that change. Cool. So part 1 is about how to find meaning in your life, your purpose, because the why and why we do something is what fuels our motivation to do it. So if we know why we are alive, our purpose behind living, then we'll just be that much more motivated to live, to thrive in life versus just surviving through it. So that's part 1. And then part 2 talks about happiness in our lives. So part 2, out of all the research I've done, of all the studies and knowledge and people in the field of happiness, I've narrowed it down to one key to happiness, that if you have this one thing in life, you will be happy. And that thing is appreciation. If we appreciate every aspect of our life, from our body to our home, to our families, to our jobs, we will be happy. But the problem is that most people, they can't appreciate some aspect of their life. They're not happy about maybe their job. They're not happy about their body. There's something in their life that they can't appreciate. So that's what introduces that lack of happiness. And where we don't, and appreciation is the result of gratitude. When we are genuinely thankful for something, then those resulting emotions, that joy, that happiness, that is appreciation. And when we can't be grateful for something, again, whether it's a body, job, whatever it might be, it turns from a gift, which to be grateful for something, you have to recognize it as a gift. It turns from a gift to an absence. And when we see an absence, whether it's, we should be healthier, but we're not. We should have more friends, but we don't. We should be doing whatever, but we're not. We should have this much money, whatever it might be. When we see it as an absence, it feels like we're doing something wrong. It feels like we're wrong in some way. And that's where a lot of unhappiness derives from, is that we are feeling at some point, some area of our life, that we're not doing the right thing, that we're wrong, that we're doing bad, that we're not living life like it should be lived. And that's where a lot of despair, that's where a lot of sadness comes from. But when we can genuinely appreciate every aspect of our life, we can be happy. So part 2 talks about, what is happiness? What does it actually mean to be happy? And how do we what strategies do we need to apply to find happiness? What mindsets do we need to apply to find happiness? And the thing about happiness too is, again, it's one of the 2 winning conditions of life. And with any great reward, with any great journey towards a treasure, if you will, there's going to be obstacles in the way. And happiness is about the greatest treasure that we can obtain in our lives, genuine happiness. So I also talk about the obstacles in the way, like what prevents us from being happy, because of course there's a reason why people can't easily be happy. It's a achievement, if you will. So it goes through exactly, what is happiness? What is the key to happiness? What mindsets and strategies can you use to find it, to secure it? And what are the obstacles in the way? And just like part 1, there's an exercise at the end that applies it to your life, so you gain and reap that value from application and actual change. So awesome. That's the first 2 parts. So the first part is meaning. When we live a meaningful life, we are driven and motivated to live to the fullest and really thrive. When we live a happy life, we're promoting growth, optimism, and really fulfillment in life. Living a life to the fullest, along with meaning. They're very parallel as far as reaping the rewards from those 2 experiences. And then we go to the part 3, the greatest barrier between us and finding fulfillment and happiness in this life, which is hate. So hate draws our mind towards all the bad in the world, towards all the negative, all the things we don't have, and sees most of life as an absence. And when we see it as an absence, we feel like something's wrong. We're doing something wrong even down to a subconscious level. So then it talks about hate. It starts off as, what is hate? Because hate is not seen as the same thing by everybody. Somebody can say they hate traffic, or they hate pickles, or whatever it might be, but that's not the same as someone who has this lifelong hate for, let's say, another race, something significant and profound in our lives. So, what's the difference? What actually is hate? And what I found is that true hate, an absolute need to destroy this thing, is only derived from the destruction of true love. So when you truly love somebody, whether it's a person, whether it's whatever it might be, and something destroys it, true hate is that negative emotion towards the cause. My grandmother had unfortunately, as far as how this ties to my life, my grandfather, he was going through his battle with cancer, and he was actually on the winning end of it. But then somebody on the highway, high up on drugs and stuff like that, wrecked his car thinking that her baby was in their car, and he ended up dying from that experience. So my grandmother had her husband that for 40 years, somebody, essentially in a way killed him. And that is the only condition in which true hate can manifest, is when something you truly love is destroyed, and that negative emotion is focused at the cause. So that's where true hate is derived. But as we all know, that's an extreme that rarely happens. So where does hate derive from that actually applies to our lives, that is more realistic and more common? So how I define hate is those negative associations to some aspect of life, whether it's a person, whether we hate traffic, whatever it might be. Hate is just thinking about a topic or focusing on it, and you feel in your body these negative emotions, whether it's anger, rage, frustration, whether it's sadness or despair, whatever it is. Hate is the cause, that underlying cause, and the symptom are those emotions.
Yeah, no, it just eats away at us from the inside. And you're right. It can be a more extreme example, like what happened with your grandparents, or something as simple as hate going to the gym, or I hate, I hate traffic, or I hate this, or I hate that. Anytime you allow hate inside your heart for anything, no matter how trivial or But and that's probably one of the hardest things, Dylan, for all people to get past, because they don't realize how trivial, how or how that hate can be such a problem when it comes to things that are so trivial. But it really does, because it builds within us. And it's a very important point that you raise, and it's something that we all have to battle. As flawed human beings, we all are going to hate something. Some people that hate more than others, and there's different degrees of hatred, and but it's important. And I think your book sounds like a very strong roadmap for people to better their lives. Bettering their attitudes, bettering their lives. That's what we're here on the Derate the Hate podcast to do. Bettering the world one attitude at a time. And this book, Winning at Life, sounds like a very good tool for people to do that, people to better their lives. And it really comes down to personal accountability and what we do as individuals to make our lives better. And when people like you, Dylan, are out there providing people with tools like this, you're definitely making the world a better place. And I greatly appreciate it. I know I do. And I think this book is going to be a strong avenue for people to better their lives.
I appreciate it. Yeah, 100%. So Winning at Life. So how I like to view it is as a guide to a life worth living. And how I view a life worth living is a life driven by the motivation of meaning, a life full of happiness, promoting growth, and a life absent of hate, which is the barrier that gets in our way from victory in life. And with the hate aspect, me specifically, at one point in my life, I was reviewing it. I'm like, what is the most important thing I can do in my life? If there was one gift I can give the world that is more profound than anything else, what would it be? And after a while of pondering this, after research and everything along the way, I've realized that the most important thing I can do in my life is to play a role in stopping the vast amount of hate in the world. Mm-hmm. Because one of the reasons hate is such an important concept, such a significant concept, is that so many people don't think it's a problem. And if you don't think it's a problem, you're not going to address it. But in reality, hate at its foundation is the reason why people are so afraid in the world, is the reason why there's so much pain in the world. How I view hate, I feel like hate is a manifestation of pain. And where there is hate, there is a significant amount of pain. So in my life specifically, hate has caused me a lot of pain, specifically self-hate, not my own, but actually somebody close to me, my father. Throughout his life, he's made a lot of mistakes. He's had a lot of negative experiences. And from the result of that, he hated himself for various things that happened. And throughout my childhood, the only way he knew how to deal with that was through substances. Basically, what happens is when he had a substance, he would do bad things. When the substance wore off, he'd regret doing those things and hate himself for doing it. And the only way he knew how to deal with that was more substances. So This negative feedback loop. And how I view it is, if people just knew how to stop hate, even self-hate, which causes your entire environment pain, even if you don't realize it. If people just knew how to release their hates, then there would be an enormous amount of pain that's just removed from the world. Where there is hate, there is pain. And when you remove the hate, you remove that pain. And for me, that's why it's such a significant topic to me, because in my childhood, if my dad could release his own self-hate, then I wouldn't have had to gone through that pain. Today, I'm grateful for it. Today, I see those experiences as opportunities to grow and develop as an individual. But if I can do something about removing that pain from the world, removing those negative forces and those traumas from people that don't need to have them, if they just knew how to release their hates, then that would be the most important thing I can do in my life, is starting to remove that hate from the world, from people, and teaching them, telling them how to live a life worth living, to where you're promoting growth and contribution and love and positivity and stuff like that.
Well, I think the key words that you said there, Dylan, was negative feedback loop, and finding a way to get in there and break that loop so it doesn't just continue. And I think you're doing that with this book. I think you're doing it with your work as a coach. I think you're doing good things, man. I appreciate the conversation we've had here today, and look forward to having you back again. A lot of good stuff. So, Winning at Life Book's going to launch on July 11th, 2022. So for anybody who listens to this after that, catch the book on Amazon or dylan-rogers.com.
And to specify there's a couple different ways to spell Dylan and Rogers. So DYLAN-ROGERS.com. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, that link will definitely be in the show notes. So anybody can go in, just Google Wilk and Dylan Rogers or Wilk and Winning at Life, and we'll find that in the D-Rate the Hate podcast show notes. With that, any last words of wisdom to share with the listeners, Dylan?
Absolutely. I just want to appreciate you having me on here, Wilk. I think you're doing wonderful things with this podcast. And D-Rate the Hate, just getting the word out there that hate is actually the bad thing that it is, that it's not just an aspect of human nature. I don't see hate as a part of human nature. I see it that we hate when we lose our nature, because our nature is to be constructive, to be positive. And when we lose our way, then hate can arrive in our lives. And sometimes we need a guide to get us out of that. And I really appreciate you doing these kind of things, because, even just listening to one podcast, all it takes sometimes is to plant a seed, and somebody's life can grow and flourish in new possible ways. And I appreciate you putting this on and the entire idea behind this podcast. So thank you for having me here.
Friends, so many important nuggets in this conversation. I hope you didn't miss. I hope you were taking notes. And you can always check out our show notes. Again, to find out more about Dylan, that's DYLAN-Rogers, ROGERS.com. If you want to find this episode later, just Google or search engine Wilk and Dylan Rogers, and you should be able to find it there, or Wilk and Dylan Rogers on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. And be sure to share it with your friends. A lot of important stuff. July 11th, 2022, Winning at Life will launch that day, and go out and get that book. Tell them Wilk sent you, all right? Friends, I just want to say again how very, very grateful that I am that you took the time to join me for another D-Rate the Hate podcast episode. Please share us with your friends, share us with your network. If you haven't done so already, subscribe and talk your friends into doing the same. Feedback and ratings, wherever you get your audio, always greatly appreciated. And with that, I will just say, get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. Friends, if there was anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, I would love to hear about it. Email me, wilk@wilksworld.com, or hit me up on most social media platforms. With that, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.